The Ascent of Mount Carmel by St. John of the Cross, Book 3, Chapter 21, which describes how it is vanity to set the rejoicing of the will upon the good things of nature, and how the soul must direct itself by means of them to God. By natural blessings we here understand beauty, grace, comeliness, bodily constitution, and all other bodily endowments. And likewise in the soul, good understanding, discretion, and other things that pertain to reason. Many a man sets his rejoicing upon all these gifts, to the end that he himself, or those that belong to him, may possess them, and for no other reason, and gives no thanks to God who bestows them on him, so that he may be better known and loved by him because of them. But to rejoice for this cause alone is vanity and deception, as Solomon says in these words, "Deceitful is grace, and vain is beauty. The woman who fears God, she shall be praised." Here he teaches us that a man ought rather to be fearful because of these natural gifts, since he may be easily distracted by them from the love of God, and if he be attracted by them, he may fall into vanity and be deceived. For this reason, bodily grace is said to be deceptive, because it deceives a man in the ways, and attracts him to that which beseems him not, through vain joy and complacency, either in himself or in others that have such grace. And it is said that beauty is vain, because it causes a man to fall in many ways, when he esteems it and rejoices in it, for he should rejoice only if he serves God or others through it. But he ought rather to fear and harbor misgivings, lest perchance his natural graces and gifts should be the cause of his offending God, either by his vain presumption or by the extreme affection with which he regards them. Wherefore, he that has such gifts should be cautious and live carefully, lest by his vain ostentation he give cause to any man to withdraw his heart in the smallest degree from God. For these graces and gifts of nature are so full of provocation and occasion of evil, both to him that possesses them and to him that looks upon them, that there is hardly any who entirely escapes from binding and entangling his heart in them. We have heard that many spiritual persons who had certain of these gifts had such fear of this that they prayed to God to disfigure them, lest they should be a cause and occasion of any vain joy or affection, to themselves or to others. And God granted their prayer. The spiritual man then must purge his will, and make it to be blind to this vain rejoicing, bearing in mind that beauty and all other natural gifts are but earth, and that they come from the earth, and will return thither, and that grace and beauty are the smoke and vapor belonging to this same earth, and that they must be held and esteemed as such by any man who desires not to fall into vanity, but will direct his heart to God in these matters with rejoicing and gladness, because God is in himself all these beauties and graces in the most eminent degree, and is infinitely high above all created things. And as David says, "They are all like a garment, and shall grow old and pass away. And God alone remains immutable forever." Wherefore, if in all these matters a man direct not his rejoicing to God, it will ever be false and deceptive. For of such a man is that saying of Solomon to be understood, where he addresses joy in the creatures, saying, "To joy, I said, why are you vainly deceived?" That is, when the heart allows itself to be attracted by the creatures. Chapter 22. Of the evils which come to the soul when it sets the rejoicing of its will upon the good things of nature. Although many of these evils and benefits that I am describing in treating of these kinds of joy are common to all, yet because they follow directly from joy and detachment from joy, although comprised under any one of these 6 divisions which I am treating, Therefore I speak under each heading of some evils and benefits, which are also found under another, since these, as I say, are connected with that joy which belongs to them all. But my principal intent is to speak of the particular evils and benefits which come to the soul with respect to each thing, through its rejoicing or not rejoicing in it. These I call particular evils, because they are primarily and immediately caused by one particular kind of rejoicing, and are not, save in a secondary and immediate sense, caused by another. The evil of spiritual lukewarmness, for example, is caused directly by any and every kind of joy, and this evil is therefore common to all these 6 kinds. But fornication is a particular evil, which is the direct result only of joy in the good things of nature, of which we are speaking. The spiritual and bodily evils, then, which directly and effectively come to the soul when it sets its rejoicing on the good things of nature, are reduced to 6 principal evils. The first is vainglory, presumption, pride, and disesteem of our neighbor. For a man cannot cast eyes of esteem on one thing without taking them from the rest. From this follows, at the least, a real disesteem for everything else. For naturally, by setting our esteem on one thing, we withdraw our heart from all things else, and set it upon the thing esteemed. And from this real contempt, it is very easy to fall into an intentional and voluntary contempt for all these other things, in particular or in general, not only in the heart but also in speech, when we say that such a thing or such a person is not like such another. The second evil is the moving of the senses to complacency and sensual delight and lust. The third evil comes from falling into adulation and vain praise, wherein is deception and vanity, as Isaiah says in these words, "My people, he that praises thee deceives thee." And the reason is that, although we sometimes speak the truth when we praise grace and beauty, yet it will be a marvel if there is not some evil enwrapped therein, or if the person praised is not plunged into vain complacency and rejoicing, or his imperfect intentions and affections are not directed thereto. The fourth evil is of a general kind. It is a serious blunting of the reason and the spiritual sense, such as is effected by rejoicing in temporal good things. In one way, indeed, it is much worse, for as the good things of nature are more closely connected with man than are temporal good things, the joy which they give leaves an impression and effect and trace upon the senses more readily and more effectively, and deadens them more completely. And thus reason and judgment are not free, but are clouded with that affection of joy which is very closely connected with them. And from this arises the fifth evil, which is distraction of mind by created things. And hence arise and follow lukewarmness and weakness of spirit, which is the sixth evil, and is likewise of a general kind. This is apt to reach such a pitch that a man may find the things of God very tedious and troublesome, and at last even come to abhor them. In this rejoicing, purity of spirit is invariably lost, at least in its essence. For if any spirituality is discerned, it will be of such a gross and sensual kind as to be hardly spiritual or interior or recollected at all, since it will consist rather in pleasure of sense than in strength of spirit. Since then the spirituality of the soul is of so low and weak a character at that time as not to quench the habit of this rejoicing, for this habit alone suffices to destroy pure spirituality, even when the soul is not consenting to the acts of rejoicing. The soul must be living, so they say, in the weakness of sense, rather than in the strength of the spirit. Otherwise, it will be seen in the perfection and fortitude which the soul will have when the occasion demands it. Although I do not deny that many virtues may exist together with serious imperfections, no pure or delectable inward spirituality can exist while these joys are not quenched. For the flesh reigns within, warring against the spirit. And although the spirit may be unconscious of the evil, yet at the least it causes it secret distraction. Returning now to speak of that second evil, which contains within itself innumerable other evils, it is impossible to describe with the pen, or to express in words, the lengths to which it can go. But this is not unknown or secret, nor is the extent of the misery that arises from the setting of our rejoicing on natural beauty and graces. For every day we hear of its causing numerous deaths, the loss to many of their honor, the commission of many insults, the dissipation of much wealth, numerous cases of emulation and strife, of adultery, rape, and fornication, and of the fall of many holy men, comparable in number to that third part of the stars in heaven which were swept down by the tail of the serpent on earth. The fine gold has lost its brilliance and luster, and is become mire, and the noble and notable men of Sion, who were clothed in finest gold, are counted as earthen pitchers that are broken and have become potsherds. How far does the poison of this evil not penetrate? And who drinks not, either little or much, from this golden chalice of the Babylonian woman of the Apocalypse? She seats herself on that great beast that had 7 heads and 10 crowns, signifying that there is scarce any man, whether high or low, saint or sinner, who comes not to drink of her wine, to some extent enslaving his heart thereby. For as is said of her in that place, all the kings of the earth have become drunken with the wine of her prostitution. And she seizes upon all estates of men, even upon the highest and noblest estate, the service of the sanctuary and the divine priesthood, setting her abominable cup, as Daniel says, in the holy place, and leaving scarcely a single strong man without making him to drink, either little or much, from the wine of this chalice, which is vain rejoicing. For this reason it is said that all the kings of the earth have become drunken with this wine, for very few will be found, however holy they may have been, that have not been to some extent stupefied and bewildered by this draught of the joy and pleasure of natural graces and beauty. This phrase, have become drunken, should be noted, for however little a man may drink of the wine of this rejoicing, it at once takes hold upon the heart, and stupefies it, and works the evil of darkening the reason, as does wine to those who have been corrupted by it. So that if some antidote be not at once taken against this poison, whereby it may be quickly expelled, the life of the soul is endangered. Its spiritual weakness will increase, bringing it to such a pass that it will be like Samson when his eyes were put out and the hair of his first strength was cut off. And like Samson, it will see itself grinding in the mills, a captive among its enemies. And afterwards, peradventure, it will die the second death among its enemies, even as he, since the drinking of this rejoicing will produce in them spiritually all those evils that were produced in Samson physically, and does in fact produce them in many persons to this day. Let his enemies come up and say to him afterwards, to his great confusion, "Are you he that broke the knotted cords, that tore asunder the lions, slew the 1,000 Philistines, broke down the gates, and freed himself from all his enemies?" Let us conclude, then, by giving the instruction necessary to counteract this poison. And let it be this: as soon as your heart feels moved by this vain joy in the good things of nature, let it remember how vain a thing it is to rejoice in anything save the service of God, how perilous and how pernicious. Let it consider how great an evil it was for the angels to rejoice and take pleasure in their natural endowments and beauty, since it was this which plunged them into the depths of shame. Let them think, too, how many evils come to men daily through this same vanity, and let them therefore resolve in good time to employ the remedy which the poet commends to those who begin to grow affection to such things. Make haste now, he says, and use the remedy at the beginning, for when evil things have had time to grow in the heart, remedy and medicine come late. Look not upon the wine, as the wise man says, when its color is red, and when it shines in the glass. It enters pleasantly, and bites like a viper, and sheds abroad poison like a basilisk. Chapter 23. Of the benefits which the soul receives from not setting its rejoicing upon the good things of nature. Many are the benefits which come to the soul through the withdrawal of its heart from this rejoicing. For besides preparing itself for the love of God and the other virtues, it makes a direct way for its own humility, and for a general charity towards its neighbors. For as it is not led by the apparent good things of nature, which are deceitful, into affection for any one, the soul remains free and able to love them all rationally and spiritually, as God wills them to be. Here it must be understood that none deserves to be loved, save for the virtue that is in him. And when we love in this way, it is very pleasing to the will of God, and also brings great freedom. And if there be attachment in it, there is greater attachment to God. For in that case, the more this love grows, the more grows our love toward God. And the more grows our love toward God, the greater becomes our love for our neighbor. For when love is grounded in God, the reason for all love is one and the same, and the cause of all love is one and the same also. Another excellent benefit comes to the soul from its renunciation of this kind of rejoicing, which is that it fulfills and keeps the counsel of our Savior, which he gives us through St. Matthew. Let him that will follow me, he says, deny himself. This the soul could in no wise do if it were to set its rejoicing upon the good things of nature, for he that makes any account of himself neither denies himself nor follows Christ. There is another great benefit in this renunciation of this kind of rejoicing, which is that it produces great tranquillity in the soul, empties it of distractions, and brings recollection to the senses, especially to the eyes. For the soul that desires not to rejoice in these things desires neither to look at them nor to attach the other senses to them, lest it should be attracted or entangled by them. Nor will it spend time or thought upon them, being like the prudent serpent, which stops its ears that it may not hear the charmers, lest they make some impression upon it. For by guarding its doors, which are the senses, the soul guards itself safely, and increases its tranquillity and purity. There is another benefit of no less importance to those that have become proficient in the mortification of this kind of rejoicing, which is that evil things and the knowledge of them neither make an impression upon them nor stain them, as they do those to whom they still give any delight. Wherefore the renunciation and mortification of this rejoicing result in spiritual cleanness of soul and body, that is, of spirit and sense. And the soul comes to have an angelic conformity with God, and becomes both in spirit and body a worthy temple of the Holy Spirit. This cannot come to pass if the heart rejoices in natural graces and good things. For this reason it is not necessary to have given consent to any evil thing, or to have remembrance of such. For that rejoicing suffices to stain the soul and the senses with impurity, by means of the knowledge of evil. For as the wise man says, the Holy Spirit will remove himself from thoughts that are without understanding, that is, without the higher reason that has respect to God. Another benefit of a general kind follows, which is that, besides freeing ourselves from the evils and dangers aforementioned, we are delivered also from countless vanities, and from many other evils, both spiritual and temporal, and especially from falling into the small esteem in which are held all those that are seen to glory or rejoice in the said natural gifts, whether in their own or in those of others. And thus these souls are held and esteemed as wise and prudent, as indeed are all those who take no account of these things, but only of that which pleases God. From these said benefits follows the last, which is the generosity of the soul, as necessary to the service of God as is liberty of spirit, whereby temptations are easily vanquished and trials faithfully endured, and whereby, too, the virtues grow and become prosperous. End of chapter 23.